What could have been the greatest military victory in human history? What if I told you that the French army was twice as large as the German army invading it? What if I told you that the French had 2 years to prepare for this very invasion? And they even built huge defensive works all along their border with Germany? And yet somehow it all went horribly wrong for the French, and they lost their country in less than 2 months. What happened during the Battle of France? Why did the French lose so badly? Why is the Battle of France one of the most important battles of World War II? As France in the 1930s was still smarting from their defeat in World War I. They blamed the war on the Germans and the Belgians and the British, who had forced them to fight on the front lines instead of being able to wage a safe war from their homeland. The French built the Maginot Line along their eastern border with Germany, a series of fortifications and defensive works stretching over 400 miles. They assumed that any future German invasion would come from the east, just like the previous war. So all they needed to do was sit back, relax, and let the Maginot Line do the work. The French also had a much larger army than the Germans, 36 divisions to Germany's 21. But the French didn't expect the Germans to do things differently, to not attack from the east where the Maginot Line protected, but instead to come in from the north through Belgium and attack the French from the flank. This new style of warfare was called Blitzkrieg, or lightning war. The Germans would surround the enemy with tanks and then bomb them into submission with their air forces. The French, who were expecting a siege warfare situation with the Germans pinned down inside the Maginot Line, had no answer to the German Blitzkrieg. On May 10, 1940, the Germans began their invasion of France. The German plan called for an attack through Belgium, Luxembourg, and France towards the English Channel. The goal was to trap the entire French army in a giant pincer movement, splitting them in half and forcing them to surrender. The French, caught completely by surprise, were in no shape to defend themselves. The Germans swept through Belgium, smashing through the lightly defended borders. Within days, the Germans were at the English Channel, having completely outmaneuvered the French. The only thing between the Germans and a complete conquest of France was the English Channel. But the Germans had one final trick left, flying back to England and bombing the English into submission. With their air forces superior to the British, the Germans should have easily won this battle and ended the war right there. But they failed to destroy the Royal Air Force, which managed to put up a fierce defense and hold off the Germans until help arrived. More specifically, until American aid arrived. Thanks to the Battle of Britain, the Germans never truly took control of the skies. But back in France, things were going really poorly. The French army was trapped in a pocket in the northeast of the country. Over 300,000 soldiers were crowded into a space the size of Rhode Island. There were not enough supplies, food, water, ammunition, or medicine. Disease ran rampant, and conditions were horrible. It was clear to the French command that something had to be done. They asked the British for help evacuating their soldiers. The British, whose own soldiers were in a precarious position, were reluctant to help. But they eventually agreed to send over some ships to help evacuate the French. By June, over 330,000 soldiers were successfully taken off the beaches of Dunkirk and brought back to England. But that was the end of the French resistance. Without their army, the French were powerless. All that remained was to surrender. On June, French leaders met with German leaders in a forest in northern Italy. The French surrendered their country to the Germans. In less than 6 weeks, the Germans had conquered one of the largest countries in Europe, thanks to the speed and efficiency of their Blitzkrieg tactics. The plan to invade France, codenamed Operation Fall Gelb, or Operation French Dressing, had worked perfectly. Hitler had achieved everything he had hoped for, and more. France was now under German control, with the British, the Americans, and the rest of the Allies out of the picture. It looked like Hitler's dream of European domination would soon become a reality. But before we get to that part, if you haven't already subscribed, please do. It really helps me out. I've been your host. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.